Selina Hartley parked her car a block away from the cafe she had built with her bare hands. From behind the smudged windshield of a rented pickup, she stared at the sleek black and gold sign that read Blue Ember Coffee. The letters were the same ones she had sketched on a napkin 10 years ago in a cheap diner after getting rejected by her fourth investor. Now, that logo sat above 50 locations nationwide and was featured in trendy travel blogs and artisan coffee magazines. But something had changed. Lately, complaints had been trickling in, quiet at first, then sharper. Loyal customers writing about cold stares and colder coffee. First-time visitors turned away by indifference. Every time she forwarded those emails to her regional manager, she got the same lazy response. Just one or two bad shifts. Nothing systemic. Selina knew better. Problems didn't drip in like leaky faucets if the pipes were clean. If something was off at the top cafe in her chain, it meant the rot had already spread. So she put on the uniform nobody noticed. She'd been up since 5, scrubbing her usually sleek image into something forgettable. Her chestnut hair was tucked beneath a navy janitor's cap, her sharp cheekbones hidden behind oversized glasses. A gray hoodie hung off her narrow frame, stained just enough to pass for old. Baggy cargo pants and beat-up Converse completed the look. She even wore a utility belt with a squeegee, rags, and a spray bottle filled with water and vinegar. It was almost comical, but it had to be convincing. She glanced at her phone. 9:42 a.m. Prime caffeine rush. Customers would be streaming in for their second cup. Meetings, remote work. Perfect time to watch the crew in their natural habitat. Taking a breath, Selina stepped out of the truck and crossed the street. The bell above the door chimed as she entered. No one looked up. Inside, the cafe buzzed with indie rock and espresso steam. Industrial lighting hung from exposed beams. Green plants cascaded from floating shelves, and reclaimed wood tables were dotted with laptops, notebooks, and half-finished croissants. It was everything her brand promised. Artisanal, grounded, curated cool. And yet, something felt hollow. A lanky barista leaned against the counter, scrolling on his phone. He didn't greet her. A second one, a girl with lavender braids and noise-canceling headphones, wiped the same spot on the counter for a full minute, without acknowledging anyone walking in. A young mother near the pastry case waved awkwardly, trying to get help. No one budged. Selina walked to the back hallway like she knew where she was going. Because she did. The staff lounge was through the swinging door, and the supply closet was next to it. She slipped inside quickly. The shelf smelled of bleach and cardboard. Mops, rags, and cleaning bottles lined the walls. She'd asked a friend from operations to slip her onto the maintenance schedule for one day, under a fake name. No one on this team had met her in person before. The regional manager she'd trusted to train them had failed miserably. 10 minutes in, no one had said a word to her. Not even a hello. She began wiping down the bathroom mirrors, pretending to focus. From the hallway, voices floated in, casual, dismissive. "I swear if one more person asks for extra hot almond milk, I'm quitting," someone groaned. Another voice replied, "Let them. These customers think they're at a therapy session, not a coffee shop." Selina kept wiping, jaw clenched. Factor 2. On the floor, she cleaned tables no one had bothered with, picked up napkins from the floor, and replaced empty napkin holders. Customers sidestepped her like she wasn't there. One teenage boy said thanks, softly, when she moved his chair for him. He was the only person who spoke to her for an hour. She spotted a small spill near the front register and reached for a rag. As she bent down to clean it, she heard a sharp laugh from behind the counter. "I guess we have a cleaning lady now," said the same lanky barista from before. He didn't lower his voice. Finally, someone to mop up after the almond. Milk mafia. His co-worker snickered, not even trying to hide it. Selina's face remained blank, but her fingers tightened around the damp cloth. So this was how it was. The air smelled like cinnamon and burnt espresso, and yet she felt something far colder settling in. Not just carelessness, but arrogance. Not just inattentiveness, but contempt for the customers, for the work, for anyone not part of their little clique. She stood up slowly, her eyes scanning the floor, the bar, the faces. Nobody noticed the woman cleaning their mess. Nobody suspected that she was the reason this cafe existed. They would, very soon. The cafe had settled into its late morning rhythm. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, catching on floating dust and glinting off mason jar lights. The espresso machine hissed with precision, steam curling into the air like lazy smoke. Selina stood in the far corner near the supply shelf, pretending to organize sanitizing wipes, though her eyes missed nothing. A group of college students laughed loudly at the back table, their empty cups pushed aside. One of them waved at the counter for a refill, but the staff ignored him. Behind the register, Camden, his name stitched, in white thread on his chest, leaned casually against the espresso machine, recounting some story about a party in the woods. His audience, the lavender-braided barista, and a third worker with piercings and faded tattoos, listened with exaggerated interest, neither of them glancing toward the customers. Selina grabbed a broom and began sweeping near the front entrance. As she moved, she passed by the mother with the stroller again. The woman's coffee had long gone cold. Her expression caught somewhere between confusion and resignation. Selina caught her eye for a brief second, offering a slight nod, then bent to pick up a straw wrapper that had drifted to the floor. Behind her, a whisper pierced the noise. "That janitor smells like vinegar. Could they not spring for a real cleaner?" It was the girl with the lavender braids, speaking just loud enough for Camden to hear. He chuckled in response, not bothering to be discreet. "She's probably one of those agency temps. You know the type. Shows up once, disappears. Forever." Selina exhaled slowly through her nose. The broom moved rhythmically, masking her clenched jaw and silent fury. A few moments later, a suited man entered the cafe, briefcase in hand, eyes scanning the counter. He cleared his throat, attempting to get the barista's attention. Nobody responded. After another try, he stepped closer and finally asked if someone could take his order. Camden sighed heavily, shot the man a glance, and muttered something about patience. Then, with glacial speed, he punched a few buttons on the register and asked, "What do you want?" Like it was a chore. The man blinked, visibly taken aback. He placed his order anyway, choosing to ignore the tone. Selina caught every detail. The customer's tight smile, the flicker of doubt before handing over his card. Small moments, but meaningful. These were the fractures that broke reputations. Not overnight, but little by little, like hairline cracks, in glass. When Selina moved behind the counter area to mop a spill, Camden stopped her with a raised eyebrow. "You can't be here," he said flatly. "Only staff past this point." She looked up, playing her role. "There was a spill. Thought I should clean it before someone slips," he scoffed. "It'll dry. Just stick to your corner. That's what you're here for." He didn't wait for a response. He turned and walked away. No one had ever spoken to her like that inside, a building she owned, not even during her early days, when she brewed coffee in a dusty garage with a broken air conditioner and a dream no one believed in. Not when she borrowed money on a handshake or slept in her car to make payroll. Every bruise she'd earned on the path to success had taught her to walk taller, never smaller. But here, inside a pristine store with her name on the paperwork, someone had decided she wasn't worth a full sentence. She didn't flinch. She simply stepped aside and finished her task. An older couple came in shortly after, both wearing matching windbreakers. They looked around, slightly lost, pausing near the pastry display. Selina straightened, waiting to see how the staff would respond. Nobody greeted them. Nobody moved. The lavender-haired girl was now texting under the counter. Camden looked up, then turned away. The couple lingered for a moment longer, then quietly walked back out, unnoticed. Selina's gaze narrowed. She knew those two. They weren't random guests. They were longtime regulars from her earliest shop in Bend, Oregon. They had supported her before she could afford ceramic mugs, when she served house roast in paper cups with handwritten labels. The woman once brought her homemade cookies on slow days. The man helped her fix a leaky faucet when the plumber never showed. That pair had become family, and now they had been dismissed like an inconvenience. Selina walked back toward the storeroom, her shoulders square, her grip on the mop handle firm. As she passed by the baristas, she heard a snicker followed by, "Why does she keep walking around like she owns the place?" It took everything in her not to laugh. There was irony in the cruelty. They had no idea how close they were to the truth. But she didn't want a dramatic confrontation. Not yet. That wasn't the point of today. The goal wasn't exposure. It was evidence. She needed to see if the decay was just carelessness, or if it was rot, deep and deliberate. As the hours crawled on, the pattern repeated. Customers hesitated, left unnoticed, or were served with robotic indifference. The staff rotated tasks, but not responsibility. They didn't see themselves as hosts, only gatekeepers. Every kindness felt like an accident. By noon, Selina no longer wondered if her instincts were right. She only wondered how long it had been like this, and how many good people had walked through those doors, hoping for warmth and leaving with disappointment. 4. The time the lunch crowd filtered in, Selina had already memorized the team's rhythm, or lack thereof. Every movement behind the counter was careless, every gesture half-hearted. There was no sense of urgency, no pride in their craft. Orders were taken with blank expressions, drinks slid across the bar without a name called out. Customers hesitated, checking their receipts or glancing around awkwardly, unsure if their drinks were ready or forgotten. Selina continued moving quietly through the café, cloth in hand, picking up napkins, wiping crumbs, and keeping her ears open. Her role gave her the power of invisibility. No one cared what a janitor overheard. In fact, the less she was acknowledged, the more truth she could gather. In the back hallway, just beyond the reach of the espresso machine's hiss, she heard muffled voices. The staff break room door was slightly ajar. A half-burned candle sat on the shelf beside it, its scent struggling to overpower the mixture of sweat, burnt coffee, and floor cleaner. Selina stepped closer, slow and silent. "You know what kills." "Me?" Camden's voice rang out, louder than he probably intended. "These people act like this place is some sacred temple of coffee. It's a job. We're not curing cancer." A woman laughed in response, likely the one with the lavender braids. "Right? Half the customers act like they're buying art, not caffeine. I swear. One more dude with a beanie and a poetry journal asks me about bean origin. I'm going to scream." Another voice chimed in, deeper and slower. Selina recognized the barista with the facial piercings. "You think corporate even cares? They're just counting money. I bet the owners never set foot in here." She's probably sipping wine in Napa while we deal with caffeine junkies." The laughter that followed was sharp, bitter, and close. Selina stood frozen beside the doorway, her pulse steady, but her thoughts flaring. That assumption, so casual, so wrong, felt like a slap. She wasn't distant. She wasn't disconnected. She had scrubbed toilets, roasted beans at 3 a.m., made deliveries when her driver quit. Every square inch of this company had her sweat in it. She turned and walked away before her face could betray her. Back on the floor, the air felt heavier. A toddler spilled juice across a chair. No one moved to help. A man in a business suit stood waiting, clearly uncomfortable, while Camden flirted with a customer he seemed to know. The drink queue grew longer, but the workers didn't adjust. There was no teamwork, no communication. Everyone operated in their own bubble. Selina busied herself with tasks, her silence sharpening into something stronger. She'd seen bad behavior before, new hires who didn't last, temporary slumps in morale. But this was different. This was entitlement. This was detachment, bred from a culture that had never been checked. Somewhere along the line, expectations had slipped, and no one had pulled them back. Just after 1, a tall woman with salt and pepper hair walked in. She wore a navy coat and carried a canvas tote with an embroidered patch that read, "Portland Reads." Selina watched her step up to the counter and smile politely, waiting to be greeted. Instead, she stood there for nearly a minute before anyone even noticed. Finally, the girl with the lavender braids glanced up. "You ready to order?" The customer didn't blink, didn't frown, just asked gently, "Do you still have the vanilla oat latte?" "It's not on the board." The barista shrugged. "If it's not there, it's not available." Selina knew that was a lie. That drink was part of their seasonal special, still stocked in every store. The woman hesitated. "Could you check, please?" Another shrug. "I guess." She walked away without explanation. Selina clenched her jaw and turned toward the back again. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall and exhaled. Frustration pulsed beneath her skin like heat rising from asphalt. Her chest tightened, not with anger, but with disbelief. They had created something beautiful here. A brand built on warmth, connection, craft, and it was being gutted by indifference. A moment later, more voices floated from the break room. "So, what's the over-under on janitor lady quitting?" Camden's tone was mocking, confident. 3 days, maybe 4 if she's desperate. "For cash," someone replied, amused. "You think she even speaks English?" a third added, laughing. "She hasn't said more than 2 words. Selina's eyes narrowed. These weren't just thoughtless employees. They were comfortable being cruel. Comfortable enough to joke about someone they believed couldn't hear them or wouldn't fight back. It wasn't just the customers who were disrespected. It was everyone who wasn't part of their clique. Then came the comment that rooted itself like a thorn under her skin. Place used to feel classy. Now it's going downhill. You can tell by who they hire. It's not premium anymore. Silence followed that sentence, not disagreement, just quiet acceptance. Selina stepped back into the cafe, moving with care, her expression calm, controlled. She resumed her silent circuit, wiping counters, organizing the sugar caddy, clearing a table. From across the room, Camden caught her eye, then smirked. As if to say, "Still here?" She stared back just long enough to make him glance away. By now, she wasn't simply observing. She was collecting. Every slight, every slur, every sign of decay. She wasn't angry for herself. She was angry for what this place used to stand for, and for the customers who walked in expecting kindness and left carrying disappointment. Soon, they would know exactly who she was and why she had come. The ETD bells above the cafe door jingled softly as an older man stepped inside. His coat was too light for the cold, worn at the cuffs. A military patch peeked from beneath the sleeve. His gait was slow but steady, aided by a cane with a faded handle. He paused near the entrance, squinting slightly through thick glasses, then took a careful step toward the counter. Selina noticed him immediately. His name was Walter, and he had been coming to Blue Ember's original location since the second month it opened. A retired Navy engineer, soft-spoken and always polite, he ordered the same drink every time. Black coffee, medium roast, no sugar. He used to joke that too much sweetness made his joints creak. Selina remembered his laugh, low and steady like a purring engine. He had once handed her a $20 bill and said, "Put this in the tip jar. You work too hard to smile like that every day." He hadn't recognized her now. He had no reason to. In her janitor's disguise, she barely recognized herself. Walter reached the front of the line and waited. No one acknowledged him. Camden was pouring cold brew into a plastic cup, chatting with another employee about weekend plans. The lavender-haired girl scrolled through a playlist on her phone, bobbing her head slightly to the beat. The man behind, the register, someone Selina hadn't heard speak yet, glanced at Walter once, then turned his attention to wiping a spotless counter with exaggerated care. Walter cleared his throat softly. The music from the speakers seemed to swell in response, drowning out the sound. He waited another full minute. His hands trembled slightly as he reached into his coat pocket for his wallet. When he tried to speak, it came out quiet. Too quiet for anyone to bother responding. Selina stood frozen by the condiment bar, holding a napkin dispenser. She watched the exchange unfold, or rather, the absence of one. Walter tried again. "Excuse me," he said, louder this time. "Is anyone taking orders?" The barista behind the counter looked up, sighed heavily, and without moving, said, "1 second." He didn't make eye contact. He didn't move faster. He didn't speak again. Walter shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable standing too long. His grip on the cane tightened. Camden laughed at something his co-worker said, not even glancing at the customer. Selina's jaw tightened. Her hands itched to rip off the disguise and shout the truth. But she didn't. Not yet. She needed the moment to finish playing out, to make its full impact. Eventually, the barista approached the register. "What are you having?" he asked, monotone, eyes already drifting to the next customer in line. Walter fumbled briefly. "Just a black coffee. Medium roast, please." "We're out of that. Dark or decaf?" Selina knew that wasn't true. She had passed the full container of medium roast not 30 minutes earlier when tidying the prep shelf. "Dark, then," Walter said quietly, handing over exact change with a slight nod. The barista barely acknowledged it. He turned, prepared, the drink with mechanical indifference, and slid it across the counter without a word. "No thank you, no confirmation." Walter stood still for a second, as if trying to decide whether to say something. Then he simply picked up the cup, turned, and slowly made his way to a quiet table by the window. Not a single staff member offered help, asked if he needed anything, or thanked him for his service. Selina's stomach turned. She crossed the floor and began straightening a nearby table, her eyes darting toward Walter. He sat staring out the window, untouched coffee in front of him. There was no bitterness in his expression, only a tired kind of patience, the sort One wears after being overlooked more times than they can count. She moved toward the break room, her heart pounding in her chest. Inside, she found the space empty, the air stale. She leaned against the wall, closing her eyes, the images from the past hour replaying in painful detail. Walter, once greeted with warmth and laughter, now treated like furniture. Camden and the others floating through their shifts like nothing mattered. The complete erosion of everything she had tried to build. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message from Dana, her executive assistant. Waiting outside. Got the packets you requested. Selena stared at the message. It was time. She walked out the back door and met Dana by the curb. The assistant handed her a sleek folder with a thick stack of documents inside. Staff contracts, revised conduct guidelines, disciplinary forms, evaluation templates. Selena took them silently and nodded once. "No press?" Dana asked. "Not today," she said. "This isn't for headlines." She re-entered through the staff hallway, returning to her role for the final time. The staff hadn't noticed her absence. They rarely did. Back in the cafe, Walter stood slowly, discarded his half-full cup, and exited with the same quiet dignity he had entered with. No one thanked him. No one watched him go, except Selena. As the door shut behind him, she looked across the cafe one last time before the reveal. Camden was leaning against the espresso bar, phone in hand. The other baristas loitered, cracking jokes and ignoring a new wave of customers entering. Selena felt the moment crystallize inside her. The evidence had been collected, the truth laid bare. What she had witnessed wasn't an accident, it was a pattern. The culture had decayed from the inside, and it had been allowed to fester. It wouldn't be allowed to continue. She placed the folder carefully beneath a vacant table, took off her gloves, and straightened her hoodie. The gloves had done their job. Now it was her turn. The reckoning would begin before the espresso machine hissed again. The cafe had begun to slow down as the afternoon sun slanted through the high windows, casting golden light across empty tables and half-cleaned counters. The crowd had thinned, leaving behind the usual quiet lull before the evening rush. Selena stood near the front, blending in beside a floor sign, unnoticed as usual. She waited, watching, listening, her heart beat slow and steady. Camden yawned dramatically behind the bar, stretching like a cat. "Man, this shift is dragging," he said to the girl with the lavender braids. She was now lazily refilling napkin, holders, earbuds in one ear. "I'm so done," she muttered. A manager, barely 30, dressed in a wrinkled flannel shirt, emerged from the back office. He gave a half-hearted wave to the crew and called out, "Let's start closing early. It's dead anyway." It was the opening Selena needed. She walked toward the center of the cafe, her footsteps deliberate. She passed empty mugs, dirty plates, unbothered workers. No one paid her any attention until she stopped directly in front of the barista bar and clapped her hands, once sharp and firm. Heads turned. Camden glanced up, frowning. The lavender-haired girl froze with a stirrer halfway to the trash. The others blinked, confused. The air thickened instantly. Selena reached up and pulled the janitor's cap from her head. Her chestnut hair, damp with sweat, fell around her face. She removed the glasses, letting them hang from one hand. Her posture straightened, expression unreadable. "I need everyone's attention," she said calmly, but with unmistakable authority. The silence that followed was immediate and total. Even the music seemed to fade. "You don't know me," she continued. "Or at least, you think you don't. But I know you." Confusion swept across their faces. The manager stepped forward, puzzled. Uh, can I help you with something? Selina ignored the question. She reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out a slim leather wallet, flipping it open to reveal a sleek black business card embossed with gold. The manager leaned in to read it. His eyes widened. Camden's smirk faded. The lavender-haired girl slowly lowered the napkin bundle she was holding. "My name is Selina Hartley," she said, voice rising just enough to reach every corner of the cafe. "I'm the founder and CEO of Blue Ember." The silence became breathless. Someone gasped. A ceramic mug clattered against a saucer. The barista near the fridge dropped a tray of clean spoons. Selina stepped forward, her gaze sweeping over each of them. "For the past few hours, I've watched you work. Or, more accurately, not work. I've seen how you treat your customers, how you speak about your jobs, and how you view the people who walk in this door." No one moved. Camden's face had lost all color. The manager took a step back, swallowing hard. "I've heard the mockery, the judgments, the lies. I've watched. You ignore an elderly veteran who's been loyal to this company longer than any of you have been employed. I've listened to your jokes, your complaints, and your open disrespect." She turned to the counter, picked up a to-go cup, and held it up. "This logo used to mean something. It stood for quality, respect, and care. We were never just selling coffee. We were building trust, one cup at a time." Her words hung heavy in the space. "But today, I didn't see pride. I didn't see hospitality. I saw entitlement, laziness, a team that thinks their time is more important than a customer's experience. A team that believes kindness is optional." She let the silence stretch, her eyes piercing. "Some of you mocked me to my face, called me the cleaning lady, laughed about whether I could even speak English. You spoke about customers like they were a nuisance. You assumed no one was watching." Her voice sharpened. "But I was." The manager tried to interject. "Miss Hartley, if I could just—" "No," she said, cutting him off with a single glance. "You've had your chance. Now it's my turn." She turned toward Camden. "You. The first to speak when I entered. The last to lift a finger when someone needed help. You treated an honored veteran like he was invisible. You laughed while customers waited. You joked about quitting. I'm going to make that easy for you." Camden's lips parted, but no sound emerged. "You're suspended. Effective immediately." She didn't wait for a response. Her attention shifted to the others. "Every person standing behind this bar is now officially placed on leave. Each of you will be reviewed individually. You'll be given the choice to reapply under a revised code of conduct, one based on values this brand was built upon." Eyes widened. Several exchanged nervous glances. "If you return, it will be with a new contract and under direct supervision. If not, your time with Blue Ember ends today." The lavender-haired girl dropped her gaze to the floor. The manager looked like he'd aged 10 years. Selina turned and walked toward the center table, where Dana had placed the folder earlier. She picked it up and opened it, revealing clean copies of the new policy and behavior agreements. She set them down neatly on the counter. "These aren't just guidelines, they're expectations. They reflect the culture we will rebuild." Then she looked at the team one last time. "You don't have to respect me, but you will respect the people who walk through that door, because the next person you ignore might just be the one signing your check." And with that, she walked to the window, watching the city move on outside as the staff stood still behind her, the weight of their silence louder than anything they had said all day. Morning returned with a chill in the air. and tension hanging heavier than steam over a fresh cup of espresso. The sky was still gray when Selina stepped through the front doors of Blue Ember, no longer dressed in faded clothes or hiding behind smudged glasses. Her stride was purposeful, her expression calm, yet unreadable. She wore a tailored navy coat over a soft charcoal sweater, her polished boots tapping against the tile floor with quiet finality. The cafe looked cleaner than usual, but emptier too. Only 5 employees had returned. Camden was not one of them. Neither was the shift manager or the barista who had laughed so freely the day before. The space, usually filled with energy, even if misplaced, felt like a theater after the actors had left mid-show. The lights were on, but no one moved with confidence. Selina paused near the center of the floor, glancing at the espresso machine, then the pastry case. Someone had restocked the muffins. Another had reset the sugar station. There were signs of effort, cautious ones, like footsteps on uncertain ground. Jessica, the barista with lavender braids, stood behind the counter, her hair now tied back in a simple bun. Her eyes met Selina's only briefly before dropping. The others, Evan, Sasha, Lena, and Ryan, stood clustered nearby. No one spoke. They were waiting for something. Selina placed a small stack of papers on the nearest table and folded her hands in front of her. "I didn't come here this morning for apologies," she began. "I'm not looking for performances, rehearsed, regrets, or clever excuses. If you're here, I assume it's because part of you believes this place still matters." The 5 of them remained silent, expressions tight, uncertain. "I built Blue Ember for people who take pride in what they serve, who care about the moments between each cup, the conversations over tables, and the kindness behind every interaction. Yesterday, I watched those values disappear." She looked directly at each face. "But I also believe people can grow. Sometimes growth starts with discomfort. Sometimes it comes after we've disappointed the very things we once stood for." She walked slowly toward the bar, her presence commanding, though her voice never rose. "This stack contains new contracts. They outline what working here now requires. Not just making drinks, not just being present. It's about intent, service, and self-respect." Her gaze landed on Jessica, who swallowed hard. "Respect is no longer optional. Neither is accountability. If you stay, you live this. If you sign, you commit. If you can't, there's no shame in walking away. But you won't return." Jessica took a hesitant step forward. Her hands trembled as she picked up a copy from the stack and began reading. Ryan followed, silent but deliberate. Evan looked at the floor, then reached for a pen. Selina stood still, watching not with judgment, but with a kind of quiet hope she hadn't felt in months. Sasha approached next, glancing up only once. She didn't speak as she signed. Lena, the last of them, hesitated the longest, her face unreadable. But eventually, she too stepped forward and scribbled her name across the page. Selina nodded once, then gathered the signed papers and tucked them into a slim leather folder. "You're not here because you're perfect. You're here because you chose to try again. That means something." She walked behind the counter for the first time in years, her fingers trailing briefly along the polished surface. She examined the supplies, the machines, the handwritten labels on the syrup bottles. Everything seemed functional, but sterile, lifeless. The soul of the shop needed more than fresh grounds and clean counters. It needed conviction. At 9:04, the first customer stepped inside. A young couple, looking slightly unsure, holding hands. They paused just beyond the entryway, scanning the menu board. Jessica took a breath, stepped forward, and offered a small but genuine smile. "Good morning. First time here?" The woman nodded. Yeah, just moved into the neighborhood. Welcome. Can I help you choose something? Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried warmth. The man smiled. They stepped up to the counter together. Selina watched the interaction closely. It wasn't perfect. There was a pause before Jessica remembered to ask about dietary preferences. Ryan accidentally reached for the wrong size cup, but there was a shift. Small, noticeable. A new shape to the way they moved. A different rhythm to how they engaged. One step forward. Selina turned toward the windows, arms crossed gently, eyes on the sidewalk. Outside, the city moved as it always had. Indifferent, hurried, layered with stories. But here, inside this cafe, something had begun again. Not a reset, but a restart, colored by everything that had come before. She thought of Walter and his quiet dignity. She thought of the laughter that once lived in these walls when customers felt seen. She thought of the long nights writing payroll by candlelight, and of the moment she first held the keys to her first tiny shop, hands shaking from exhaustion and joy. Sometimes things break, and sometimes breaking is necessary for rebuilding stronger foundations. The espresso machine hissed behind her, followed by the soft clink of porcelain on wood. The smell of fresh coffee reached her nose, brighter than it had been in days. It wasn't fixed yet, but it had begun, and for now, that was enough.